so much for being with us. And we're joined now by one of the members of Congress who is going to be in charge of the decision with his colleagues on whether or not this war is going to get funded. Tom Cole of Oklahoma is a former member of the Armed Services Committee. He currently serves on appropriations. He's also a past chairman of the Republican House Campaign Committee. Tom Cole, I was interested in the speech. There were two lines back to back. One saying that I determined that it's in our vital national security interest to deploy 30,000 troops. And second, we're getting out in July 2011. Looked like a message for each party. Do those two go together?
Well, I hope they do. That'll be the real question down the line. Look, I think everybody has confidence in our commanders and our troops. Certainly the president does, and he exhibited that tonight. But wars usually aren't fought on timelines. So
Vice President Cheney doesn't seem to have too much confidence. He accused the president of dithering with this decision and said that he had raised some doubt about how committed he was. Did he raise doubt in your mind?
I think the process would have been a little better if it was less public. But look, we're past that now. The president's made his call. He's put 30,000 Americans on the line there. He's laid out what he wants to accomplish. I suspect Congress will look long and hard on it. But at the end of the day, the real question will be, if this doesn't work by July of 2011, what do you do then? Is that really, if it's in our vital interest, you got to be prepared to adjust. But I think the president, again, made the case tonight, certainly to the left, that this is important. I think he did a great service in doing so. He made a commitment, and I suspect he'll get strong support as long as the military backs his commitment, which I assume they will.
Well, you've been watching this war up close as a member of Congress, the Armed Services Committee, for some time. 8 years, the job's not done. Can it get done? Are you confident that
Actually, I am very confident. Again, I have a lot of confidence in commanders and troops. I don't think Afghanistan, as difficult as it is, as tough as Iraq was. We're leaving Iraq on success now. And I think the president made a very good point when he said this is not a popular opposition we're dealing with here. And this is a country from which 9/11 was planned. Surely this is a place where the left and the right can agree. With the Taliban harbored our enemies. Al-Qaeda operated with impunity throughout the 90s there, setting things up. We've got a good start. We have a friendly government in Kabul. We've got American forces on the ground. Frankly, the place is nowhere near as dangerous as it was in 2001, 2, and 3. We have a chance to win here. We should take it.
Is it a fair shot for the president and members of the White House to say the reason we've got to ramp up with this surge right now after 33,000 troops earlier in the year is because this war was neglected by the Bush administration?
I don't think so. I think, frankly, in 2006 and 7 and 2006, it certainly looked pretty successful. The light footprint was the strategy that the military recommended there. But again, I think that kind of looking backward isn't going to move us forward. I think we're much better off to say, look, we want to win. We're going to put the additional forces in. On the ground, and hopefully we'll succeed in the timeline he's laid out. But there's a big difference. If that's a goal, that's okay. If that's a drop-dead date, that's quite another matter.
Dissect the politics here before we bring in Joe Sestak. You've run the House Campaign Committee. How is this going to affect the campaigns of 2010? Are Republicans going to solidly support it and you see Democrats split, or do you expect the Democrats to go with their president?
I think the great majority of Republicans will support the president. They'll have some tough questions. They'll wonder why 30, not 40, which General McChrystal requested in terms of troop strength. They'll wonder about the timeline. But at the end of the day, they're going to be supportive of the president, particularly as long as we get funding bills that are not cluttered up with non-related items, which we've had in the past. The real question, I think, will be for the Democratic Party more than the Republican Party. This is our commander-in-chief, but also their presidential nominee and their president that they've been successful in electing. Will they trust his judgment? Frankly, I think enough will, along with the majority of the Republicans, that the president will have a good bipartisan majority as long as he sticks at it. He's now defined this as vital to our security. And again, if we reach, and I hope we don't, July of 2011, we find it's tougher than we thought, as was the case in Iraq, he's got to be prepared to make other tough decisions then. You can't ask men and women to go out there and say, look, it's in our interest, but you got to get it done on a timeline in 18 months. You got to be willing to stick with them until they get the job done.
Well, you mentioned the Democrats. Let's bring in Joe Sestak, a Pennsylvania congressman who has seen military conflict from both sides. He's a retired Navy rear admiral. but he's also now running for the U.S. Senate from Pennsylvania. And Congressman, first of all, what did you think of the president's speech tonight and the way he tried to balance the concerns within your party by saying we'll be out, begin to get out in July 2011 with doubling down on troops and adding another 30,000?
John, I thought the president made a good speech, first off. As you know, I was on the ground in Afghanistan as head of the Navy's anti-terrorism unit early in that conflict. I strongly believe he did a good job in laying out our goals, our objectives there, which is truly Pakistan's safe haven for al-Qaeda. I do think that the president needed to provide an exit strategy in terms of benchmarks that we measure success or failure by. He set a timetable. I would have rather had seen, like he said in the speech, that conditions on the ground will be taken into account, but that those conditions were better assessed and provided to the public as benchmarks by which we can measure the cost of this war in terms of, are the benefits that are accruing to us better than the cost? And we can only do that if there is this ability to have benchmarks provided. I didn't see that in the speech. We had heard he would provide that, and I think we need that ability to measure our progress or change to an alternative strategy. All warriors do that. They assess the strategy. They don't set a firm deadline, and I wish we had seen that.
Congressman, we've heard from some in your party on the left, Dave Obey of Wisconsin, who chairs the Appropriations Committee, raising questions about whether we can pay for this conflict, this additional deployment. Barbara Lee, your colleague from California, said she's got legislation to try to prevent this ramp up from being funded. What is your assessment of the strength of those opponents, especially as you run in a Democratic primary for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania?
If there's anything I learned after 31 years in the military, is to do the right thing for the nation. The party is second. You don't do things, I believe, in this job, and the reason I am running for the Senate in Pennsylvania is for too long the leaders have been those that are more worried about political calculation rather than doing what's right in an honest, forthright way. This is not about my Senate primary.
Well, do you think,
I strongly believe that within our caucus, it will take convincing to see that this is about America's security. I strongly believe that.
Do you agree with your colleague Tom Cole that this strategy can succeed by July 2011? And are you absolutely confident that the votes exist in a majority to give the president what he wants in terms of resources?
I spoke last March and said, after hearing in a closed briefing, that this strategy that we had begun to embark on at that time, that has been better articulated by General McChrystal, would take 3 to 5 years. I still believe that. I think that's about the right time frame. If these benchmarks, which I think we still need to have, and the White House statement of fact says they will measure our progress, but it wasn't in the speech, if they show that success can be earlier, then we should do that. But I think a firm deadline in this war is different than wishing we had one in Iraq. In this case, I strongly believe this is not about Afghanistan or its central government that's so inept. This is about our security and ensuring that that safe haven of al-Qaeda in Pakistan is exterminated, and that is the kind of conditions that we need to measure.
And, Congressman, do you agree with Tom Cole that there will be a majority for the resources that the president wants, notwithstanding all the other things the Democratic Party wants to do on health care, energy, and other priorities?
Yes, I do believe that you will find that the House as a whole, when you bring the two sides together, there'll be enough to say this is the right way to do things. We should have the resources. I do think we should pay for this. I have felt even in the Iraq war that we should have brought it into the budget at some time ago. I don't think taxing the rich is necessarily the right way to go. There's many tax loopholes for oil companies and others that we could look at. But I do believe that it needs to be brought into the budget process and paid for, because in my mind, it helps set the priorities of what's important to this nation.
Congressman, I think we're out of time. You'll get an argument from Tom Cole of Oklahoma about closing those oil company loopholes, but we're going to leave it right there. Joe Sestak of Pennsylvania, Tom Cole of Oklahoma, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And joining us now, former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger. Secretary Eagleburger.